15.
Here's another iconic woman for your consideration. Tina Turner. As probably most of you know, and I won't try to sing, she talked about what's love got to do with it. She talked about it being a second-hand emotion. She was talking about the serious business of relationships and her heartbreak and things like that. But what I want to talk about is what's happiness got to do with it? And I want to talk about how happiness itself is a serious business. And we should learn to understand and respect it and not take the mickey out of it quite as much as some people do and take it more seriously. And the point really is that we are emotional beings. Human beings are emotional. And this is a picture from a very famous piece of research in the 1950s by a psychologist called Paul Ekman. And what he did was he was convinced that there was a set of primary emotions in human beings, a bit like primary colors. And you sort of mix them together. And he took pictures of these actors expressing different emotions, and he took them around the world to see whether people could recognize them. He obviously started with American college students, because that's where all psychological research, and in fact too much psychological research stays. But he did take them as far and as wide as Papua New Guinea and places like that. And what he found was every language had a word for these emotions. So, we have bottom left, surprise, anger, fear, disgust, sadness, and with an exceptionally nice gap in his teeth, happiness at the bottom. And psychology has spent a lot of time and research thinking about what are so-called negative emotions, the ones that are difficult to feel, fear, anger, depression, sadness, those sort of things, and much less attention towards happiness, for example. And what psychologists know is that emotions are more than feeling states. They are linked to the functionality of the organism. They have evolved. Evolution has invested a lot of time and energy in evolving these emotions in us for reasons that make us fit for purpose. So fear is about a source of danger. Anger is about a violation of a norm. Sadness is about a loss of a support system. And it's functional for us to feel these emotions. So fear immediately stimulates in the organism a need to detect and run away. If you hear a rustle in the grass and you're in the savannah, it pays you to think it's a tiger and to take evasive action. It does not pay you to think it's got beautiful stripes. Isn't it a lovely creature? Look how elegantly it moves, because by that time it's got you. So fear is very, very useful, as are anger and sadness. Grief is a functional process. It's saving energy until we notice that support systems improve. But until very recently, happiness has just been thought of as like a signal of good functioning. If I'm a happy frog, I stay in my pond. And if I'm unhappy, I hop off. And that's predominantly how it's been understood. But this woman, a lot of women tonight, Barbara Fredrickson, has got a great theory which comes out of positive psychology. So Barbara is an empirical psychologist, just like we've heard from before, and she does experiments with people. So she does things like shows one group of people a picture of a video of a baby unattended to who is crying. That puts the respondents pretty quickly in an anxious mood. She shows the other group a happy gurgling baby, and they feel cheery. And then she sets them the same tasks, and they perform differently. And she's got a whole body of work. But basically, the overall sort of finding from it is that the positive emotions broaden our responses. And we actually have more peripheral vision when we're in a good mood, but we're more open to experiences. I would imagine that most of you met what our American cousins call your romantic partner when you were in a good mood. You probably smiled at each other. A smile is a signal that you may approach me. If I scowl, you stay away. If I smile, you can approach me. And basically, Barbara's shown that being in a good mood makes us more flexible, more open to experience, we're more creative even, can see the bigger picture more. When you're in a restaurant and you put your hand up and you can't get service because your waiter's grumpy, they actually don't see you. They lose peripheral vision and they go and do something else. Now, in a waiter restaurant thing, maybe that doesn't matter. But if it's your drip machine that is going wrong in a ward and the nurse doesn't see it, that's more serious. And you can look at data that looks at the well-being of the nursing teams and the death rates on wards, and they are linked. They are linked. Doctors in good moods make better diagnoses of you. Biggest tip for a doctor, go into the room, first 10 seconds, make them happy, they'll diagnose you better. So, very, very important. And what she also shows is that over time, the experience of positive emotions broadens and builds your psychological resources. You're able to cope more, you become more resilient and all those sort of things. So there's lots of good stuff that's very functional to us around happiness. And if you take that into the workplace, which Barbara has done with a colleague called Asado, they looked at how teams perform at work. They looked at 60 teams across one company. There were high-performing teams, medium, low-performing teams. And they looked at their team meetings, and they looked how they interacted. Not what they were doing, how they were doing it. And they looked at how positive they were, how supportive, or how cynical they were, those sort of things. And what they found was there was a great difference in the ratio of positive to negative exchanges. In fact, it was huge. In the high-performing teams, there were 5 or 6 positive exchanges to every negative. In the low-performing teams, there were 3 negatives to every positive. These were very, very different. They looked at some other stuff, which was about how inquiring they were, how much they were driven by their own agendas, and these are important factors that go together. But what Losada did, he's a complexity scientist, and he drew this pretty picture, which is, some people call this the butterfly effect, but it's what's called strange attractors. But anyway, to get you to the point of it, is that the high-performing teams are operating in this big, expanded green space. And the graph goes emotional energy, going up, high energy to low energy, inquiring, which means sort of looking at new things, to advocacy, which means carrying on the same. The high-performing teams can move anywhere and do move anywhere in that whole expanded space, but the low-performing teams just collapse into a non-inquiring, low-energy state. And we've all been in those team meetings. You go in there, the chair has their agenda, they're going to drive it through, they're not going to listen to anybody, and there's no energy in the system. We've been into the meetings which are buzzy and fun, and innovation comes out of it. So just think about that, about how critical that is to any organizational success, that they can move around these spaces. Sometimes we need to carry on with what we're doing, but we need to have the possibility to do more than that. And they come up with this magic ratio, which is that we need about 3 positives to every negative exchange, up to 8 positives to every negative, to be highly functional as a team. They actually show theoretically that if you go over 8, you sort of collapse into a sort of Pollyanna space of positivity and nothing goes. So there's really a need for grit in the system too. But you think about your next team meeting, how are you behaving? Not what are you doing, not the business, but how are you doing it is very, very important. So, but what they do not show, the study, is any causality here. They're just observing the high-performing teams are happier. They're not saying that happiness brings about it. So does happiness come from high performance, or does happiness lead to high performance, or is it both? That's the sort of magic question, really. If a business is going to invest in happiness, it's got to think it's going to lead to high performance. Well, Gallup have done an interesting study. Well, Gallup do lots of studies, and they have absolutely masses of data. And at the bottom here, you'll see this data from 11 organizations, 2,000 teams, 140,000 respondents. It's a big, big study. They looked at happiness at time 1 and performance at time 1. Happiness at time 2, performance at time 2. And the question is it this, or is it this that's going on, or is it both? What they did was they looked at the middle. They looked at some of the things they thought that would cause, for example, happiness to increase performance. Staff stay. If you're happy in your job, you don't leave. Costs you a lot of money if someone leaves your organization. Customer loyalty is that customers like companies which have got nice people, nice service people, get good service. So they looked at these, and they looked at all the roots, and it's a big statistical exercise. It's called structural equation modeling or pathway analysis. And I'm not going to bore you with all the details, but they looked at 2 models. So the first model was this one, from happiness to performance. The second one was from these sort of mediating ones through performance, actually to happiness at time 3. And it would lead this way. They checked both models. Both models fitted the data, but model 1 fitted it better. And in fact, the data suggested that the causality goes from happiness at work to performance is twice as strong as from performance to happiness. They're going both ways, but they're twice as strong. Now, what I really want to suggest to you is that happiness works. It's a serious business, but somehow it's not taken seriously. You know, most business leaders would think that's not the right thing to do. And in fact, here's a quote from Business Week, which says, "The management are focused on employees to the detriment of shareholders. Why would I want to buy a stock like that?" And that obviously is one analyst, and we can think he's just a bit mad. I imagine it is he. Or we can look at what the company was. The company was Costco, which we think about giant supermarkets, but Costco has very, very good relationships with their employees. And the CEO of Costco explicitly says that he thinks in order to deliver shareholder value, you need to please your customers and your employees. If you want to make your customers happy, you've got to make your employees happy. And Costco regularly comes in the Great Places to Work in the USA. Now, one of the interesting things about the Great Places to Work, and this shows that stock analyst is not an individual, but there's a whole bias against this, is that Great Places to Work, that companies listed in the 100 Great Places to Work have outperformed the stock market every year between 1985 and 2011 by 2 to 3%. Now, what does that mean? It means that even that information is in the marketplace. The marketplace always talks about having perfect information. This list is very widely publicized. It comes out, there's a big fanfare about it. Stock analysts will be aware of this list, and yet they miss every single year 2 to 4% of growth, even though that information is in the system. So this is a huge bias that they actually think this doesn't matter. And if you want to think the other way, all motivational psychology will tell you that high bonuses do not motivate. But somehow, organizations pay massive bonuses and they don't listen to the data. So they are systematically not understanding that making your employees happy is a way to grow your businesses. And so the role of happiness at work, I would say, it broadens teams' possibility spaces, it helps speed high performance, and it generates shareholder value. But we still have to convince a lot of people about this. Somehow they don't get it. And it always interests me when people don't listen to data. And I think sometimes it's us statisticians who are to blame. We don't present our stuff in a way that is easy for people to understand and is convincing. And is a long way away. I mean, here's an example, is that 50% of people in the UK did a staff survey in the last 3 years. Probably many of you have done one. But when we asked them whether it felt a positive impact on their work, 80% of them have said it had made absolutely no impact on their work at all. It was a tick box exercise. So there's all this data in companies. They are investing in this data, but they are not making it work for them. And that's just a waste of data. It's a waste of everybody's time. People now no longer care about staff engagement surveys because they don't feel anything is going to come out of them. So, as I was introduced, really, I'm a statistician, I work in a think tank, so I was thinking, well, maybe we could do something that more mimics the way that emotions work as feedback systems in the body. They give us information and they change the way that we behave. So we've created a survey which basically allows you in real time to measure what your happiness at work is and gives you feedback straight away. Most staff surveys, you never see the results, they go off into the ether and they never come back. So you can see how you do. They're really fun to use, these surveys. They present the data in a way that's easy for people to explore. And there obviously are other surveys available, other products are available, but you can use this for free, so it's quite fun. So what I would say is that the happiness at work surveys, they need to act like a mirror to the organization. We've talked a bit about therapists. I'm trained as a therapist. All a therapist does is they listen to their client and they reflect back, and sometimes they ask a few challenging questions. A survey, if you give it back to everybody and you let everybody in the organization see the results, acts like a mirror. You start to see yourself collectively for the first time. But it also acts like a window. It offers an opportunity for thinking about how the working life could be better and how you could step into a new way of behaving. And that's why Tina was wrong, and that happiness has got a lot to do with it. Thank you very much.